Elias lived alone at the far edge of the colony, where the lights grew thin and the wind carried dust across metal walkways. The settlement was small compared to the great cities closer to the core worlds. Most people came here because they wanted quiet lives or because they were running from something behind them. Elias never spoke much about his past, and nobody asked too many questions. In frontier space, silence was a form of respect. His home stood near the landing pads, a simple metal structure patched together from old cargo panels and reinforced glass. From his doorway he could see ships arriving and leaving, their engines glowing softly against the evening sky. He worked as a cargo pilot, transporting supplies between isolated colonies. It was honest work, predictable, and that was enough for him. That evening felt colder than usual. A dry wind moved across the settlement, carrying a low humming sound from distant generators. Elias finished unloading crates from his ship and walked slowly back toward his home, shoulders tired from the long trip. He thought about making a simple meal and then resting before his next run. As he reached his door, something small caught his attention. At first, he thought it was just a bundle of cloth blown by the wind, but when he stepped closer, he saw movement. Curled tightly against the wall was a small figure covered in silver fur. Two large ears twitched slightly, and a thin tail wrapped around her legs. Elias stopped. The being looked young, almost fragile, with soft features that reminded him of a wolf, yet her eyes were unmistakably intelligent. Golden eyes slowly opened and fixed on him. They were filled with exhaustion but also sharp awareness. Neither of them moved for several seconds. Elias raised his hand slowly to show he meant no harm. He had seen many alien species during his years traveling through space, but this one was unfamiliar. Her breathing sounded uneven, and he noticed faint marks along her arms, signs of injury or strain. "Hey," he said quietly, his voice calm. "You okay?" She didn't answer. Instead, she tilted her head slightly, watching him as if studying every movement. Around her neck was a broken metallic collar with flickering lights. It looked like a translator device, but it was damaged. The wind grew stronger, making her shiver. Elias hesitated. Bringing unknown aliens into one's home could lead to trouble, especially in a frontier colony where every incident might draw unwanted attention. Still, leaving her outside was not something he could accept. After a moment, he opened the door and stepped aside. "You can come in," he said simply. The small Wolfgirl didn't move at first. She sniffed the air carefully, then slowly stood on unsteady legs. She was smaller than he expected, barely reaching his waist. When she walked forward, her steps were cautious, but she didn't show fear, only careful curiosity. Once inside, warmth filled the room. The simple heater hummed softly. Elias closed the door and fetched a blanket, placing it nearby. She watched him closely, her ears flicking whenever he moved too quickly. He prepared a bowl of food, choosing something mild and safe. When he placed it on the table, she approached slowly, sniffed it, and then began eating with surprising speed. Hunger clearly outweighed caution. Elias leaned against the wall, observing quietly. He noticed how she paused between bites to watch him, as if confirming he wouldn't suddenly change. After eating, she sat back and wrapped herself in the blanket. Her eyes remained fixed on him. "You got a name?" he asked gently. The collar around her neck flickered weakly. A faint crackling sound emerged, followed by a broken whisper. "Lyra," the word was soft, almost uncertain. "Lyra," he repeated. Her ears lifted slightly, as if pleased that he understood. He nodded. "I'm Elias." The rest of the evening passed in quiet calm. Lyra explored the small room slowly, touching objects with careful curiosity. She examined tools, watched lights, and tilted her head whenever machines made noise. Every movement suggested intelligence beyond her small size. Eventually, exhaustion overtook her. She curled up near the heater, tail wrapped around herself. Elias dimmed the lights and sat at the table, reviewing cargo schedules, but his attention kept returning to her. He wondered where she had come from and why she had chosen his door. Outside, a transport ship landed late into the night. Its engines rumbled longer than necessary, as if waiting. Elias noticed but said nothing. Frontier space always held strange visitors. Morning arrived with pale sunlight filtering through dusty windows. Elias prepared for another delivery run, moving quietly so he wouldn't wake her. But as soon as he picked up his jacket, Lyra's ears twitched. She opened her eyes instantly, alert. He smiled faintly. "Morning." She stood and stretched, then walked directly toward him. "I have work," he explained, gesturing toward the door. You stay here safe. Lyra watched him, head tilted. He stepped outside. A few seconds later, he heard soft footsteps behind him. He turned. Lyra stood just outside the door, looking at him expectantly. Elias sighed softly. No, stay. She remained still, but her gaze never left him. He took a few steps away. She followed. It became clear quickly that she had made her decision. Residents of the colony stared as they passed. Some whispered quietly. A few children pointed with excitement. Lyra stayed close to Elias, matching his pace, occasionally glancing around with sharp awareness. At the landing pad, Elias tried once more. You can't come, dangerous. She stepped closer instead. Something about her expression made him stop arguing. It wasn't stubbornness alone. It felt like trust. As he prepared the ship, he noticed a distant figure watching from across the pad, wearing dark clothing and holding a small device. The person turned away quickly when Elias looked back. A strange feeling settled in his chest. Inside the ship, Lyra explored carefully, sniffing controls and watching lights. She seemed fascinated by everything. When the engines started, she didn't panic. Instead, she watched Elias closely, learning. As the ship lifted into the sky, Elias realized that his quiet routine had changed completely. And somewhere far away, unknown observers marked his ship as it left orbit. Elias kept his eyes on the navigation screen, but he could feel Lyra watching him from the co-pilot's seat. She sat very still, tail wrapped around her legs, ears turning to catch every new sound inside the cabin. The ship's engine made a steady hum, and the stars outside looked like scattered ice. This delivery run was supposed to be easy. One jump to a nearby settlement, drop off medical packs, pick up spare filters, come back before night. Elias had done it many times, but now every small detail felt different because he wasn't alone. Lyra leaned forward and looked through the front window at the starfield. She pressed her fingers gently against the glass like she expected to feel the cold light. Her damaged collar flickered once, then went quiet again. Elias glanced at her. You okay? Lyra blinked and gave a small nod. It was not the kind of nod humans used often. It was slower, like she had learned it by watching him. He tried not to think about the way she had followed him without hesitation. He had seen fear in people before, real fear, when they were truly unsafe. Lyra did not look like someone who had lived an easy life, but she didn't show panic now. That worried him more than fear would have. It meant she had already faced worse than this. The ship entered the jump lane. The cockpit lights dimmed automatically. Elias focused, hands steady on controls. He had trained long ago in situations where hesitation could ruin everything. He didn't like remembering those days, but muscle memory didn't ask permission. The jump was smooth. When space stretched and shifted, Lyra's ears flattened for 1 second, then lifted again. She didn't cry out. She only watched Elias as if his calm was the anchor that told her the world was still safe. When normal space returned, the settlement appeared ahead like a cluster of metal beads floating near a rocky moon. The place was small, mostly miners and repair crews. Elias had friends here, people who preferred honest work and quiet nights. As they approached docking, Lyra's posture changed. She sat straighter. Her eyes narrowed slightly as if she smelled something wrong through the air filters. Elias noticed. What is it? Lyra looked at him, then at the side window, then back at him again. She lifted one hand and pointed, not at any object, but at the space behind them. Elias checked the rear sensors. At first, nothing unusual appeared. Then the screen updated and a small signal blinked at the edge of range, another ship too far to identify matching their direction. That could be normal. Many ships traveled these lanes. Still, Lyra's expression did not relax. Elias docked and powered down. He grabbed the medical crates, then paused. Stay close, he said, softer than he meant to. Lyra rose and moved to his side at once, as if she had been waiting for the instruction. Inside the station's main corridor, people turned to look. The air smelled like metal, oil, and warm, recycled oxygen. A mechanic with a stained jacket stared at Lyra, then at Elias. Elias, the mechanic said, you adopt a new passenger. Elias didn't smile. Found her at my door. The mechanic whistled low. That's not normal. No, Elias agreed. Lyra's ears flicked. She watched the mechanic closely, not hostile, just alert. Elias walked toward the storage office. The station manager, a woman named Hannah, met him near the intake desk. Hannah had sharp eyes and a practical way of speaking that made people listen. You're late, Hannah said. Then she noticed Lyra, her eyebrows rose. And you brought a surprise. Elias set the crates down. Medical packs, signed and sealed. Hana scanned them quickly, then looked at Lyra again. What is she? I don't know, Elias admitted. Her collar is damaged. She says her name is Lyra. Lyra lifted her chin slightly at the sound of her name. Hana's gaze softened just a bit. She looks young. Elias nodded. She was outside in the cold. Hana's voice lowered. Elias, this station has rules. Unknown visitors can cause trouble. I know. Hana leaned closer. There's talk. A ship landed at your colony late last night. People saw strangers asking questions. They didn't give names. Elias felt his stomach tight. He kept his face calm. Did they come here? Not yet, Hana said, but if they're searching, they might follow the lanes. Elias glanced down at Lyra. She was watching Hana now, eyes steady. No fear, just focused attention. Hana exhaled. Listen. I can process your delivery fast. Get your filters and leave. Don't stay long. Elias nodded. Thank you. While Hana handled the paperwork, Elias walked Lyra toward a quieter corner near a window. Below the glass, the rocky moon rolled slowly, like an old scar in space. Lyra looked out, then leaned closer to Elias, almost touching his arm. It wasn't a human habit, but Elias understood what it meant. She felt safer when she could sense him. He crouched slightly so his face was closer to hers. I'm not going to let anyone take you, he said, careful with his words. But you have to help me understand. Why are they looking for you? Lyra's collar flickered again. A faint crackle sounded like a broken radio. Run, the collar translated, weak and delayed. Elias frowned. You ran? Lyra nodded. Cage, the collar whispered. The single word made Elias' hands tighten into fists. He forced them to relax. He didn't want Lyra to see him lose control. He had seen what control meant to frighten people. It meant safety. He tried again. Who? Lyra hesitated. Her ears angled back. She looked away. Men, the collar said, then stuttered into silence. Elias understood enough, not the full story, but enough to know this was bigger than a lost child wandering into a colony. Hana returned with the receipt and a small crate of spare filters. All set, she said, and Elias, be careful. He gave a short nod. Always. They headed back to the ship. The corridor seemed louder now, as if every footstep carried farther. Elias sensed eyes on them. Some curious, some suspicious. Lyra stayed close, walking perfectly at his pace. As they approached the docking bay, Lyra suddenly stopped. Elias halted too. Lyra! Her ears stood straight up. She stared toward the bay entrance, eyes wide, body tense. Elias looked. A group of 3 people stood near the docking control panel. Their clothing was clean and too expensive for a mining station. They weren't carrying visible weapons, but their posture was confident in a way that felt practiced. One of them held a tablet, its screen angled toward the others. They turned when Elias approached. The tallest one smiled politely. Pilot Elias Varn, he said, saying the name like he had rehearsed it. We'd like to speak with you. Elias didn't stop walking. He shifted slightly so Lyra was behind him. About what? The man kept the smile. A matter of missing property. Lyra made a low sound in her throat, not loud but warning. The man's eyes flicked toward her, then back to Elias. We have documentation. The small one belongs to a licensed research group. She is valuable and must be returned. Elias kept his voice calm. She's a person. The man's smile thinned. Our laws do not define her as such. Elias' mind worked quickly. 3 strangers on a station. They had tracked him. They were confident because they thought he would cooperate. If he refused outright, they might cause trouble in ways that would harm the station's people. Elias didn't want that. He stepped closer to the docking bay door, using motion as a way to keep control of space. Show your license to the station manager, he said. If you're legal, they can handle it. The second person, a woman with tight hair and a cold stare, spoke for the first time. We already did. The manager is considering. Elias felt anger rise. Hana had warned him, but she hadn't said they were already here. Maybe she hadn't known, or maybe she didn't want to cause panic. The tall man lifted his tablet slightly. We can settle this peacefully. Hand her over and we forget your involvement. Lyra's fingers tightened on the back of Elias' jacket. Elias took a slow breath. No. For a second, the bay seemed to go quiet. The tall man's smile disappeared completely. I expected that, he said. Humans often form attachments quickly. It is one of your species' weaknesses. Elias' eyes narrowed. Or strengths. The man's gaze hardened. If you keep interfering, you will create consequences. Elias stepped backward toward his ship ramp. I'm leaving. The woman moved slightly to the side, blocking the direct path. She didn't touch him. She didn't have to. Her body position alone was a wall. Elias stopped. He didn't want to push past. A small shove could turn into a bigger incident, and then station security would get involved, and that would be chaos. Lyra's breathing changed. Elias could hear it, faster, sharper. Her eyes were locked on the woman now, and her tail was stiff. Elias lowered his hand slowly behind him, palm open. Lyra's fingers found it, small and warm. She held on. Elias spoke calmly, like he was negotiating a cargo dispute. "You can't force this here," the tall man shrugged. "We can, we won't harm anyone. But we can shut down your ship systems, we can report you, we can block your licenses, we can make sure every station denies you fuel." Elias felt a cold realization. These weren't simple hunters, they were connected. They had paperwork. They used rules as weapons. Lyra suddenly leaned forward, nose lifting, as if she caught a scent through the air. Her gaze snapped toward the ceiling vents, then toward the docking control panel, then toward the tall man's tablet. Elias watched her closely. Her eyes moved like someone reading a room, finding weak points. She wasn't panicking, she was thinking. Lyra lifted her hand and pointed not at the people, but at the control panel beside the bay door. Elias understood. They might be using the station systems to trap him. He raised his voice slightly. "Hana," he called down the corridor. A moment later, Hana appeared at the far end, walking quickly. Her face tightened when she saw the strangers. The tall man turned smoothly. "Manager, we are still awaiting your cooperation." Hana looked at Elias, then at Lyra, then back at the strangers. Her jaw tightened. "I reviewed your documents," Hana said carefully. "They're complicated." The man smiled again. "They are valid." Hana crossed her arms. "This is my station. If you want to take someone, you need proper clearance, not just a tablet file." The woman with tight hair stepped forward. "Manager, don't make this difficult." Hana's voice stayed steady. "You don't threaten my people." The tall man sighed like he was tired. "We do not wish to cause trouble. Elias, be reasonable." Elias looked at Hana. He didn't want to involve her, but she was already involved. The strangers had made sure of that. He chose the simplest truth. "She was outside my door," Elias said. "In the cold, hurt. She followed me because she trusts me. I won't hand her over." Hana's eyes flicked to Lyra. Something soft moved in her expression, but she kept her voice firm. "This station is neutral ground. If you want a dispute settled, bring it to official channels." The tall man's calm face cracked just slightly. "Official channels will take time," Hana shrugged. "Then you wait." The strangers exchanged quick looks. Elias could almost see them calculating. Time was not on their side if official records got involved. Someone might ask why a research group called a living being property. Lyra's collar flickered. A clearer sound came through this time, like the device was waking up under stress. "No go," it translated, broken. Elias whispered, "I know." The tall man took one step back, then lifted his hand slowly as if giving a signal. Elias' attention snapped to the docking lights. For a second, the bay door control panel blinked red. Elias' ship ramp began to retract automatically. Elias cursed under his breath. Someone was trying to lock his ship. Hana spun toward the control panel. "Who is doing that?" The woman with tight hair didn't answer. She simply watched, eyes cold. Lyra moved. She darted forward faster than Elias expected. She didn't attack anyone. She didn't shove. She slid past Elias and reached the control panel with quick, precise movements. Her fingers touched the panel like she understood it. Then she pressed 3 buttons in a pattern that looked too exact to be random. The red blinking stopped. The ramp froze, then slowly lowered again. Everyone stared. Hana's mouth opened slightly. "How did she?" Lyra stepped back and returned to Elias' side. Her ears were high. Her eyes met the tall man's, and for the first time she didn't look small. The tall man's face tightened. He had not expected that. Elias felt a strange mix of shock and pride. Lyra had just saved his ship using station tech she shouldn't have known. That meant her background was more advanced than he thought. It also meant the people hunting her were even more serious than he had guessed. Hana turned sharply to the strangers. "That was you," she said. "You tried to interfere with station systems. That is not neutral behavior." The tall man raised both hands. "A misunderstanding." Hana's eyes narrowed. "Leave my station. Now, if you return, you will deal with station security and the trade guild." The tall man stared at Elias for a long second, then nodded slowly. "Very well, we will speak again." The strangers walked away in calm steps, but their calm felt fake now. It felt like a mask they were forced to wear because they couldn't afford open conflict here. When they disappeared into the corridor, Hana exhaled hard. Elias, she said quietly, you need to go, now. Elias nodded. Thank you. Hana glanced at Lyra. And good work. Lyra blinked, then looked away, almost shy. Elias guided Lyra up the ramp and into the ship. As soon as they were inside, he sealed the hatch and powered up systems. His hands moved quickly, not rushed, but efficient. Lyra sat in the co-pilot seat again. She watched him with complete focus, like his actions mattered more than the ship itself. When engines ignited, Elias finally allowed himself one deep breath. They lifted away from the station. Behind them, the docking lights shrank into the distance. Elias watched the sensors again. The same unknown signal appeared at the edge of range, closer now. They're following, he murmured. Lyra's ears lowered slightly, but she didn't panic. She leaned forward and pressed her hand against Elias' arm just for a second, then pulled away. A small gesture, but clear. Elias understood what she was saying without words. She trusted him to lead. Elias tightened his grip on the controls. Okay, he said softly. Then we do this smart. He didn't head straight back to his colony. Instead, he adjusted course toward a longer route, one that passed through a busy trade lane where many ships traveled. More eyes, more witnesses, less chance for quiet pressure. Lyra watched the star map, then looked at Elias. Her collar flickered once more. Safe crowd, it translated, faint but clear. Elias stared at her for a moment, surprised. You understand routes? Lyra's eyes didn't boast. They simply said yes. Elias felt the truth settle in deeper. Lyra wasn't just lost. She was trained, tested, shaped for something. And yet she had still chosen him, not because he was powerful, not because he had authority, but because he had opened a door instead of closing it. As the ship entered the crowded lane, the trailing signal drifted farther back, as if the hunters didn't want attention. Elias looked at Lyra. We're going to find a way to fix your collar, he said. We're going to figure out who you are. And if anyone tries to treat you like an object again, he stopped, choosing the safest words, the truest words. They'll learn humans don't abandon people who trust them. Lyra's eyes softened. Her ears relaxed. She leaned back in the seat, still watching him, still close. Outside, stars slid past like bright dust. And in the quiet space between jumps, Elias understood something important. His life used to be about delivering cargo and staying invisible. Now it was about protecting someone who had no one else. And that kind of mission was never small. Elias kept the ship steady as it moved through the busy trade lane. Large cargo vessels passed slowly around them, their engines glowing like distant suns. Smaller shuttles darted between the heavy ships, following invisible paths controlled by station traffic systems. It was safer here. Too many witnesses, too many sensors. Anyone following them would have to stay careful. Lyra sat quietly beside him, but she was not relaxed. Her ears moved often, turning toward every small sound. Sometimes she watched the star map. Other times she studied Elias' hands on the controls, as if learning how he guided the ship. Elias noticed how quickly she adapted. She was no longer just observing, she was understanding. You helped back there, he said after a while, at the station. Lyra blinked slowly, her collar flickered, struggling to translate. Stop trap, it said. Elias nodded. Yeah, you did. She lowered her gaze, as if unsure how to react to praise. Silence filled the cockpit again, but it felt calm rather than empty. Outside, ships moved in steady lines, lights blinking in patterns that signaled safety and cooperation. Elias adjusted their route slightly, heading toward a mid-lane service platform. He needed fuel soon, and he also wanted to check whether their pursuers were still tracking them. Lyra suddenly leaned forward, nose lifting slightly. What is it? Elias asked. She pointed toward the sensor panel. A faint signal appeared again, far behind them but steady, the same unknown ship, keeping distance. Watching, Elias exhaled slowly. They're patient. Lyra's ears lowered a little. She looked toward him, waiting for his reaction. We stay calm, he said. We stay smart. He guided the ship into a gentle turn, merging with a convoy of larger transports. The bigger ships created sensor shadows that made tracking harder. It was a small trick he had learned years ago. Lyra watched the maneuver with focused interest. Her eyes followed the paths of other ships as if she could see patterns beyond the screen. They reached the service platform after 2 hours. It was a floating structure shaped like a ring, filled with refueling stations and repair bays. Lights flashed along its surface like a slow heartbeat. Elias docked carefully. The moment engines powered down, he felt a strange weight lift from his shoulders. Being in motion meant danger could follow. Standing still meant decisions had to be made. Lyra waited until he unbuckled before moving. She stayed close as they stepped onto the platform. The air smelled cleaner here, filtered and cool. People walked around carrying tools, crates, and data pads. Some stared at Lyra with curiosity, but no one stopped them. Elias led her toward a small repair shop owned by an old technician named Marin. The shop was filled with cables hanging from the ceiling and half-open machines resting on metal tables. Marin looked up when they entered. Her gray hair was tied back, and her eyes were sharp despite her age. "Well," she said slowly, "you don't visit unless something interesting happens." Elias gave a small smile. "I need a favor." Marin noticed Lyra immediately, her gaze softened slightly. "And who is this?" "Lyra," Elias said. "Her translator collar is damaged. Can you take a look?" Marin crouched carefully, keeping her movements slow so she wouldn't scare Lyra. "May I?" she asked gently. Lyra hesitated, then glanced at Elias. "It's okay," he said quietly. Lyra stepped forward. Marin examined the collar without touching it first. Her eyebrows rose. "This is advanced tech," she murmured. "Not standard civilian gear." Lyra's ears twitched. Marin carefully connected a small scanner. Lights blinked across the screen. "Someone locked parts of the system," Marin said. "Not just damaged, restricted." Elias frowned. "Can you fix it?" Marin thought for a moment. "I can bypass some limits, not all. Whoever made this didn't want easy access." Lyra watched silently as Marin worked. The room filled with soft mechanical sounds. After several minutes, the collar glowed brighter. Lyra blinked rapidly as if hearing new sounds. "Clear, little," the collar translated. Elias felt relief. "Better," Lyra nodded quickly. Marin leaned back. "That's the best I can do without full authorization, but be careful, this device is not just for translation." "It collects data." Elias' eyes narrowed. "Tracking? Possibly," Marin said. "I recommend shielding it or removing it completely if you can." Lyra's hands moved to the collar instinctively, as if unsure whether to keep it or throw it away. Elias crouched beside her. "Do you want it off?" Lyra hesitated. "Need voice," the collar said. Elias understood. Without it, communication would become much harder. "We'll keep it for now," he said, "but we'll protect it." Marin handed him a small signal dampener. "Attach this. It won't block everything, but it will make tracking harder." Elias nodded gratefully. When they left the shop, Lyra walked closer to him than before, almost touching his arm. Her steps felt lighter, as if the clearer translation gave her confidence. They found a quiet corner near a viewing window. Ships moved outside like slow stars. Elias sat down. "Tell me more," he said gently. "About before, about the cage." Lyra looked down, struggling to find words. The collar flickered. "Room white," it translated slowly. "Watchers tests no outside." Elias listened carefully. "Not free," she added. He kept his voice calm. "You escaped." Lyra nodded. "Door open, run." Her ears lowered slightly, remembering. Elias felt anger rise again, but he kept it under control. Showing anger now would only frighten her. "You did the right thing," he said. Lyra looked at him with surprise, as if she expected blame instead. He smiled faintly. "Everyone deserves freedom." She watched him for a long moment, as if measuring the truth in his words. Suddenly, a loud announcement echoed across the platform. Incoming ships requesting emergency docking. Elias' instincts sharpened. Emergency arrivals often meant trouble. Lyra's ears stood straight up. She turned toward the entrance corridor, eyes wide. 3 figures walked through the crowd, the same hunters. They moved calmly, but their eyes scanned every face. Elias stood slowly. "We leave," he said quietly. Lyra nodded instantly. They walked toward their ship without rushing. Running would attract attention. The tall man spotted them halfway across the platform. His smile returned, but it did not reach his eyes. "Pilot," he called calmly. Elias ignored him and kept walking. Security drones hovered near the ceiling, recording everything. The hunters could not act openly here, but their presence alone felt heavy. The woman with tight hair stepped closer. "You cannot avoid us forever." Elias turned slightly, just enough to face them without stopping. "I'm not avoiding, I'm protecting." Lyra stood beside him, silent but steady. The tall man sighed. "She belongs to a research program that benefits many species. You interfere with progress." Lyra's ears lowered at his words. Elias shook his head. "You're wrong, she's not property." The man's smile faded. "You humans always think emotion equals truth." Elias met his gaze calmly. "Sometimes it does." For a moment nobody spoke. Then Lyra stepped forward. Elias felt surprise but did not stop her. She faced the hunters directly. Her voice came through the collar, clearer now. "I choose," she said slowly. The hunters froze. Lyra pointed toward Elias. "Stay." The simple words carried weight far beyond their sound. The woman with tight hair looked irritated. "She doesn't understand the legal structure." Lyra shook her head firmly. "Understand." Elias felt pride rise in his chest. She was finding her voice. The tall man's expression hardened. "This conversation is not finished." Elias turned away. "It is for now." They walked back toward the ship. Lyra stayed close, but her posture had changed. She looked taller somehow, more certain. Once inside, Elias sealed the hatch quickly and powered up engines. As the ship lifted away, Lyra watched the platform shrink below them. Her breathing slowed. Elias checked sensors. The hunter's ship undocked shortly after. "They won't stop," he said quietly. Lyra nodded. "No." Elias looked at her. "Are you scared?" She thought for a moment. "Little," the caller said. Then she added, "Not alone." Elias smiled softly. "No, not alone." The ship entered open space again, stars stretching ahead. Elias adjusted their course toward a hidden relay station he knew from old days. If anyone could help them understand what was really happening, it would be there. Lyra watched him closely, full trust in her eyes, and Elias realized something important. This was no longer just about protecting a lost traveler. This was about challenging a system that refused to see her as a person. And humans had never been very good at ignoring injustice. Elias guided the ship away from the crowded trade lane and toward a quieter region of space. Stars stretched endlessly around them, silent and distant. The engine hummed steadily beneath their feet, and the familiar vibration calmed him. Flying had always helped him think clearly. Lyra sat beside him, watching the navigation screen with focused eyes. Since speaking up at the service platform, something about her felt stronger. She still stayed close to him, but now there was confidence in the way she held herself. Her ears were more relaxed, her gaze steady. Elias adjusted their route toward an old relay station hidden among a cluster of broken asteroids. The station was rarely used by official routes. Long ago, traders and explorers had built it as a neutral communication hub. Now it was mostly forgotten, but Elias knew it still functioned. Lyra tilted her head when the relay station appeared on the screen. "Safe," her caller translated softly. "I hope so," Elias said. "People here don't ask too many questions." She seemed to consider that answer carefully. As they approached, the station lights flickered on slowly, reacting to their signal. The structure looked old, covered in patches from repairs done over many years. Small antenna towers extended outward like thin branches. Elias docked smoothly. Once the engines powered down, he sat quietly for a moment, thinking about everything that had happened. The hunters would not stop. They had resources and authority. If Elias wanted to protect Lyra, he needed more than just running away. He needed proof, truth, something strong enough to challenge their claims. Lyra watched him silently, as if she sensed the weight of his thoughts. "We're going to talk to someone," he said gently. "A friend." Inside the relay station, the corridors were quiet. Dim lights glowed along the walls, and the air smelled faintly of metal and recycled oxygen. Footsteps echoed softly. A tall man with dark skin and calm eyes stood near the central console. His name was Rowan, a former communications specialist who now ran the station alone. Rowan raised an eyebrow when he saw Elias. "You don't visit without reason." Elias gave a small nod. "I need information." Rowan's gaze moved to Lyra. He didn't stare too long, which Elias appreciated. "And she is the reason?" "Yes." Rowan gestured toward the console. "Talk." Elias explained everything. The night Lyra appeared at his door, the damaged collar, the hunters claiming ownership. Rowan listened without interruption, fingers moving across the console as he searched databases. After several minutes, Rowan paused. "This species," he said slowly. "There are rumors, rare, highly intelligent, strong emotional bonds. Some research groups believe their abilities increase when paired with certain individuals." Lyra's ears twitched. Rowan continued. "There are debates about their status. Some classify them as independent beings. Others treat them as biological tools." Elias felt anger rise again, but he kept his voice steady. "She's not a tool." Rowan nodded. "I agree, but legal systems don't always follow morality." Lyra stepped closer to Elias, her tail brushing lightly against his leg. Rowan studied her for a moment, then spoke gently. "Lyra, do you understand why they want you?" Lyra hesitated. The collar flickered. Power, it translated slowly. Use, bond. Rowan exchanged a glance with Elias. That confirms it. They want to study or control the bond you formed. Elias crossed his arms. Then we expose them. Rowan leaned back. That will be dangerous. I know. Silence filled the room. Finally, Rowan nodded. I can send a broadcast to neutral networks. If you speak publicly, they cannot act quietly anymore. Lyra looked uncertain. Elias crouched beside her. You choose, he said softly. Always. She watched his face for a long moment. Then she nodded. Rowan began preparing the transmission. Screens lit up, connecting to multiple channels across nearby systems. While they waited, Lyra walked slowly around the station, exploring. She paused near a window, watching stars drift by. Elias joined her. You've come far, he said quietly. Lyra looked at him. Together, the caller translated. He smiled faintly. Yeah, together. The broadcast system beeped. Rowan turned toward them. Ready. Elias stood beside Lyra in front of the camera. He wasn't comfortable with public speaking, but he knew honesty mattered more than perfection. This is Elias Varn, he began calmly. I'm a civilian pilot. I want to talk about someone who deserves to be heard. He stepped aside slightly so Lyra could be seen clearly. She is Lyra. She is not property. She is a person. Lyra looked into the camera, uncertain at first. Then she spoke slowly. I choose freedom. The simple words carried weight. Rowan sent the broadcast across open channels. Within minutes, responses appeared, messages from traders, colony leaders, independent researchers. Some offered support. Some asked questions. But most importantly, the situation was no longer hidden. Elias felt relief. The hunters could not quietly claim her anymore. Suddenly alarms sounded. Rowan's eyes widened. Incoming ship, fast! Elias checked the screen. The hunters had arrived. They tracked us anyway, Elias muttered. Lyra's ears lowered slightly, but she stayed calm. The hunter's ship stopped outside docking range. A message appeared on the console. The tall man's face filled the screen. His polite mask had vanished. You made a mistake, he said coldly. You turned a private matter into a public challenge. Elias stood straight. She deserves to be free. The man's gaze shifted to Lyra. You do not understand what you reject. We offer purpose. Lyra shook her head firmly. Not cage. The man's expression hardened. You will regret this. Rowan muted the transmission. They can't attack directly here. Too many networks watching, but they might try pressure. Elias nodded. Then we stay visible. Hours passed while messages continued arriving. Support grew. Several independent groups questioned the hunters' legal claims. Some demanded investigation. Lyra stayed beside Elias the entire time, sometimes resting her hand lightly against his arm. Each contact felt grounding, like a silent promise. Eventually, another transmission arrived, this time from a neutral legal counsel. They announced an official review of Lyra's status, temporarily suspending any ownership claims. Rowan smiled slightly. That's big, they just lost authority to take her. Elias felt tension leave his shoulders. Lyra looked between them. Free? She asked. For now, Elias said gently, and we keep fighting. Outside, the hunter's ship slowly turned away. They had lost the element of secrecy. Lyra watched the ship disappear into the darkness. Her ears slowly lifted again. Days later, after the legal counsel confirmed her recognition as an independent being, Elias prepared to leave the relay station. Rowan shook his hand firmly. You did something important, Rowan said. Elias shrugged lightly. Just did what felt right. Lyra bowed her head slightly toward Rowan, a gesture of gratitude. Back on the ship, Elias set a new course, not toward hiding, but toward open space, toward possibilities. Lyra sat beside him, calm and peaceful. Where go? She asked. He thought for a moment. Anywhere you want. She looked at the stars, eyes shining softly. With you, she said. Elias smiled. The ship lifted into the endless sky, leaving the relay station behind. The future felt uncertain but not frightening. Together, they had faced powerful forces and chosen trust instead of fear. As the stars stretched ahead, Elias understood that the greatest strength of humanity was not power or technology. It was the simple choice to stand beside someone who needed help and never walk away. And Lyra, once alone and hunted, now traveled freely across the galaxy, not as an object or experiment, but as a companion, a friend, and a living proof that bonds built on trust could change everything.